What is up, you slimy, dirty motherfucker who have cursed Islam Makhachev?
This is Nwadei!
Who the hell has put this curse on Islam Makhachev? Is it the people in Lafayette, Louisiana rooting for Dustin Poirier, or is it the American crowd who watches every single pay-per-view who's also rooting for Dustin Poirier? It has to be the people spreading good energy towards Dustin Poirier and bad energy towards Islam. And I'll tell you here, if you watched my breakdown that I just posted a couple days ago about UFC 302, the Cohen main event, there's so many things going against Dustin Poirier in the technical side of things. The way he gives his back up when trying to get up to his feet, the way he drops on guillotines when he doesn't necessarily need to, the way he stands squared up to his opponents, which allows for those double legs to happen and allows those grappling exchanges to happen a little bit more often than they need to be. There's things working against Dustin Poirier and just how good Islam Makhachev is. But if you're an Islam Makhachev fan watching right now, you're not going to be happy with what I have to say, because there are some dirty MMA fans who have cursed Islam Makhachev with this staph infection. It just came out that Islam Makhachev, you saw the wound on his shin, and very well it could be he kicked an elbow or he kicked something that ended up cutting his shin. Very well could just be a sore, right? But when you see it in that circular fashion, that's almost a pinpoint way of telling that it's an infection. You don't see a gash, you don't see a slash, it's nothing like that, but it's a hole. Same hole you saw on Benoit Saint-Denis, Dustin Poirier's last opponent. Same one you saw sprouting out of his forehead, and later on he came out to say, oh, I had staph infection. It's the same leg of Islam Makhachev that you saw in the Bilal Muhammad video where he got announced for UFC 304 against Leon Edwards. Shout out Bilal Muhammad. Guys, I think it's pretty safe to assume that this is staph infection. And now there's a couple things we have to discuss. Assuming that it is staph infection, let's just assume the worst, because that would be a miracle, and miracles do happen in the sport of mixed martial arts. I think we're all aware of that. But let's just say that it is staph infection. If it happened earlier on in the camp and he was taking antibiotics and it's even healed up now, which it looks to be pretty healed up by now, it still has an effect to play. It means that it could have messed up when he's peaking. It means it could have messed up how much he was able to actually work throughout that camp in order to have the gas tank and the cardio that Islam Makhachev usually has. And if it happened more recently, if it happened within the last 2 weeks of the camp, it's not the staph infection itself that fucks you up, but it's the antibiotics that you take in order to prevent it from being infectious or to prevent it from being a spreadable infection that actually messes you up. And not only does it mess up your cardio just purely off of fighting off the infection, right? But since your body's fighting the infection, it is taking up so much of your energy that you have less energy to do other things. But it also messes up your weight cut, makes it way harder to cut weight. Why? Your body's trying to hold on to as much water as possible, when your objective is to lose as much water weight as possible. And we know these Russians, the way they cut weight, purely water. They 20, 25, 30 pounds of water come out of their system. They don't even really diet. They just kind of kill themselves to make the weight and rehydrate as much as possible. That's why you saw the IV usage in Australia for Islam Makhachev against Alexander Volkanovski the first time. That's why they love fighting in Abu Dhabi, not only because they get paid more, but because of the 30-hour rehydration period that they get in order to fill themselves back up. Now, this one is in Newark, New Jersey. A little bit different, but the fact still remains the same. If this is staph infection, which it is, this is now 2 opponents in a row for Dustin Poirier. For the last fight, Dustin Poirier. For the I have nothing to lose, Dustin Poirier. For the I have nothing else to gain in this sport, Dustin Poirier, that have had staph infection. I mean, it just seems like everything is lining up, does it not? And when things line up in this sport, I mean, god damn it, when things line, I mean, you think about Conor McGregor was coming about, the leprechaun himself, the lucky leprechaun himself, one of the luckiest MMA fighters on ever, right? just had the perfect stride in the UFC. He commented on himself. He was talking about, oh, I'm not gonna say all the things he was saying, but I'll show you a picture right here. Talking about how pretty much these Dagestani Russians, whatever, are slimy, dirty, and they live in Staph, and you know, all that crazy shit Conor was saying. He still thinks Dustin's gonna get subbed in the first, which that's probably the route Islam wants to go if he doesn't have a gas tank. But still, it just seems like everything's lining up. I mean, the nostalgia is crazy. Dustin Poirier walking around with his daughter around his neck, a picture of his daughter around his neck. His daughter's gonna be in the front row seats to watch him for the very first time, which might be his very last time. I mean, when a fighter says it's gonna be my last fight and they generally look like they're comfortable with the situation and that they're having fun with the situation, I mean, it really seems like it ends up okay. I mean, we thought Dustin Poirier's last fight was going to be at UFC 299 fighting against Benoit Saint-Denis, but he ended up winning. He fought like just to have fun, it seems like. He adjusted in the fight. He was losing every second of that fight until he ended up knocking out Benoit Saint-Denis' forward pressure having ass. Not to mention that Benoit Saint-Denis is almost the best practice fight that you could get for Dagestani Russian wrestler fighting style. Now, Islam Makhachev is not as relentless or as stupid with his pressure that Benoit Saint-Denis was, but a worst case scenario, Islam Makhachev, someone who's desperate to get this fight to the ground, having that be a case scenario, well, he got all the practice he needed with Benoit Saint-Denis. Sure, he's gonna get taken down. Sure, he's gonna get his back taken. Sure, he could survive all of that, even though Benoit Saint-Denis is not as good of a grappler as Islam Makhachev. He could survive all of that and then end up knocking Islam Makhachev out. What I will say is Islam Makhachev is not one who's reckless with his energy. He's not one to waste energy coming forward aimlessly, chaining takedowns together aimlessly. Generally, when he chains takedowns together, he gets it. Generally, when he shoots, he's in on the hips. He's in deep in the clinch. It's never a sloppy shot. He is always great about initiating the grappling exchanges. However, we talked about some of the things Dustin Poirier does that technically that could hurt him in the fight. What about the ones he does right? What about going against southpaw, having more experience going southpaw versus southpaw than Islam Makhachev? Islam Makhachev has went southpaw versus southpaw 2.5 times. And I'll tell you why. The first time Adriano Martins, in the UFC I'm talking about, the first time Adriano Martins, he got slept over. Trying to come forward, got slept over by a lead hook. The second time against Gleison Tibau, he landed an overhand that Khabib almost nostalgic-like called out, and he listened to him immediately like a video game controller and the video game itself. Almost as if Khabib had a video game controller controlling Islam Makhachev. And the third time, or the half a time, was with Bobby Green because he went southpaw for a lot of that fight. Now, Bobby Green has a very different style than Dustin Poirier. Bobby Green did not try and kick his legs at all. Dustin Poirier, something he does very well against southpaws is finds those leg kicks. He kicks the calf very well. He kicks the legs very well. He's been on the other side of the leg kicks as well, so he's very educated defensively about them. Another thing he does is he adds up on combinations very well against other southpaws. You can see that in the second or well, third Conor McGregor fight. And another thing that he does that is very weird and outside of the southpaw versus southpaw scenario, something that Dustin Poirier is really good at, or two things that Dustin Poirier is very good at that Islam Makhachev struggles with. One, that Dustin Poirier is excellent in boxing range. That's actually where he's best at. Islam Makhachev is great in kicking range. He's great in the very close wrestling exchanges, very close range in grappling scenarios. But that's his biggest struggling point, is the boxing range. Just like all the other Russian wrestlers, he struggles with that. He sometimes shies away from it or leaves himself very exposed in those boxing exchanges. Sometimes those two go hand in hand. And two, when the going gets tough, he's not going for a finish. When the going gets tough, it turns from a fight to a sport, to a match. We saw that with Alexander Volkanovski. He stopped trying to finish him when it was in that body triangle in the 4th round. He was accepting the bottom in that 5th round because he already knew he won against Alexander Volkanovski. It's in his brain, it's in his DNA. Dustin Poirier, however, he never stops fighting. You could be on top of him, you could sub him, you could choke him out, you could do whatever, but he's either gonna finish you or you're gonna finish him, and that's just the way his fights go. If not, y'all are both going to the hospital afterwards, and that's just the way they go. You could bring it up against Dan Hooker, against Conor McGregor, against Khabib, against anyone. It's either kill or be killed. And that's not Islam's mindset. And for a guy who is battling staph infection, who's gonna have less cardio, who's gonna feel that fatigue a little bit quicker, who's gonna be in a fight with Dustin Poirier, that's not a good sign. Now, along with all the nostalgia that's going his way and the Louisiana voodoo that's being placed on Islam Makhachev, I gotta say, the cherry on top might be him changing his walkout song. He's not walking out to The Boss as we're used to him walking out to. Instead, he's walking out to Diamonds by Rihanna, a girl. Nobody walks out to girls anymore, man. The last time we saw this was Mike Perry, and they got his song wrong. They chose Halo by Beyonce. He won, however. And the time before that, Sinead O'Connor by Conor McGregor. You saw the energy that was in the ring. Just energy. The energy that's around this fight. Now, again, if you go watch my breakdown, I chose Islam to win based off of technicalities, right? This is context, though. Context is telling us something else. Context is telling us that miracles have happened before in MMA, and they damn sure can happen at UFC 302. And the last thing, one of the last things that nostalgia is telling us, Paulo Costa's on the card. Every time Paulo Costa has been on a pay-per-view, the champions have lost their belt. I don't know how much more we need. Let me know in the comments down below how you're feeling about this. Islam fans, I'm sorry, but I don't know if, yeah. I don't know what the outcome is gonna be. If you were betting on Dustin Poirier before, you definitely need to bet on him now. I already thought it was gonna be a close fight. This makes it only closer. Now, if Islam ends up kicking Dustin Poirier's head, which I think he can do, then, you know, I would look very stupid. But as of right now, miracles do happen in MMA, and the Diamond himself is a living miracle. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys after UFC 302.